Hi guys. In this part we're going to talk about shapes. Now shapes are very essential to our whole course and the whole process. Shapes are very telling. Shapes are kind of the language of your subconscious and mathematical language of the universe. So it is very important that you kind of at least keep in the back of your mind what shapes might represent. I'm going to give you a brief description. Now, not every shape will represent the same thing for everybody, of course, and that's why you can interpret shapes in different ways. Again, they are very important to our course. We will be using shapes in different manner, in interpretation, in diagnostics, and in fixing what we drew by using other shapes. There are organic shapes, which are mostly our drawings are, but we do need to know the basic non-organic shapes, and which are circles, squares, triangles. I'm going to try to doodle a couple for you. So the first one I want to talk about is a circle. Circle has no beginning and no end. They represent the eternal whole things and everything in between. In every culture, the types of things that represent sun, the earth, the moon, and many celestial objects are represented in a shape. It's a very, very inviting shape and very kind of wholesome shape. They are used to suggest similar objectives such as wheel and a bowl, many types of fruit, well-rounded, very competent. Circles have free movement. They can roll. The shading and lighting, lights of the shape, when you use color, they represent different things. But in general, they are graceful. They are seen as feminine, warm and comforting, very sensual, very loving. Their movement suggests energy and power. The competence suggests the infinite unity and harmony of everything. They're protective, they endure, they confine, they protect, they keep things in or keep things out. They offer safety, connection. They suggest community, integrity, protection. They're usually less common in design, so they work well to attract attention, to emphasize things, or to set things apart. So a regular shape doesn't have to be perfect. Like my circle is definitely not perfect. Nevertheless, it is a circle, and one of the descriptions that I gave you can probably fit into a certain design or a picture that I would be working on. So if I choose to make a circle and work with it, you can kind of, because you know your own mind, you know what you're concentrating on in your specific design and the way you kind of blend this initial shape in. We're going to be able to describe to you what you might need to work on, what this represents for you, or you might interpret in your own way what it represents for you, because as I mentioned before, this is a process where a very non-intrusive process. If you want to keep things to yourself and work on your problem without kind of letting the group know, if you're working in the group, you have an idea what this might represent. That's kind of why I want to give you a brief introduction into shapes, so you have an idea. Now, squares and rectangles are stable. They are very familiar, very trusted shapes. They suggest honesty. They have the right angles. They represent order, mathematics, rationality, formality. They're seen as earthbound. Rectangles are very common geometric shapes in a lot of things that we see. Majority of texts we read, on things we see on the internet, they're usually in triangles and squares. Squares and rectangles, they suggest comfort, solidity, peace, security, equality. They're very familiar and stable, very common. They might sometimes seem boring, and they're not attention grabbers. They're kind of like very expected, stable shape. Think of web pages that kind of frame images to help them stand out. So they're very like reassuring, like titles, let's say. Every element on a web page is defined by a rectangle. That's just how web pages are modeled, and the reason is because what the shape represents. Even like other things on the website that you see a rectangle, you see a whole bunch of little rectangles, because subconsciously they have a specific representation that I just told you about. What else? Again, I want to bring your attention to the shape itself. It might not, what I draw a rectangle as and what you draw it as might look completely different. Somebody might want to choose to draw one right here if I ask them to, kind of like borders are coming out. See, even these two are super different, because you see that this here is connected and this one kind of, has a little cross here, which we'll talk about also. So again, don't judge the picture, interpret the picture, because we want this to be a very, again, this is going to be a very soothing process, a very peaceful process. But I will give you a lot of information on this, so kind of pay attention, or of course you can always go back and watch every video after you're done your picture, kind of when you're going to start putting things together as we advance into the course. Now, triangles, eternal hope. Triangle is triangle. It represents a relationship between the human and the divine. It could be stable or unstable, depends on how it's turned. It's dynamic tension, action, aggression. Triangles have energy, they have power. And the stable, unstable dynamic can suggest either conflict or a very, very steady thing. The balance is symbol for law, for something that is even. Depending on which way they point, they could be used to suggest things like a pyramid, an arrow. In spirituality, they represent the religious integrity. They can suggest self-discovery, revelation. The strength of a triangle suggests masculinity. The dynamic nature makes it better soothing for growth of high-tech companies as a representation, or a financial institution. When they design a logo, you'll see them quite often. They convey progression, direction, purpose. And again, and the reason I'm showing you is because when I say, a triangle, you kind of have something in your mind, a picture that you retrieved from your mind, from signs that you see on the street. But sometimes this is also a triangle, so it doesn't have to be the straightforward method. You don't have to actually draw, a square or a perfect circle or a perfect triangle. You kind of learn to read your drawing. We will show you as we go along that sometimes you can't recognize the shape right away, but it's there because your subconscious put it there. And that's why I want you to know the representation. Now, a spiral is also very important. It's a natural growth pattern. Because we find that pattern in many organisms. It suggests the process of growth and evolution. They convey ideas of fertility, birth, expansion, transformation. They are cycles of timeline, of seasons, very common shape in mystical things as a symbol. They move in a certain direction. They represent a returning to the same point in life's journey with new levels of understanding. They represent trust, sometimes change, release of energy, and maintaining flexibility through transformation. Clockwise spirals represent a projection of an intention. Counterclockwise, the fulfillment of an intention. Double spirals can be used to symbolize opposing forces. Crosses. Before that, I want to show you that there are again, spirals that are not always noticeable. You might just kind of like think you're making just a, circle on top of circle, when in fact, if you follow the line, you could see that this was a spiral. Depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you could kind of read your direction of your spiral. Crosses. They represent healing very often. They are seen as the meeting place of divine energy. 4 points can represent self, nature, wisdom, and higher power or higher being. Crosses suggest transition, balance, faith, unity, very often, hope, and life. They represent relationships, synthesis, a need for a connection to something. Whether that something is group or an individual or even yourself or project related. So it's very interpretive shape. I just want you guys, again, to keep all of this in mind, and not necessarily when you're drawing, but it's more when you're actually working on your drawing or trying to interpret your drawing, trying to read an issue that you might be working on, and you recognize something that you didn't expect to see. So in your next drawing, you can address this specific issue. That's why sometimes I often mention the diagnosis, is because you're going to do a series of pictures, and this is a progressive work. You're going to develop the knowledge, because this is a tool that I want you to have, that we developed so you can come back to and work at it on your own and work yourself through your issues. And that's why I stress all these little things, because at the end of the course, they will all come together as a big picture, and they're going to be very important into your process and implementation. Thank you.